Well, the most appropriate entrance can mean one of two things, in my view. Appropriateness could be related to safety. We would obviously, safety is of utmost importance to fire investigators. We want to make sure that we get out as well as get into premises, get out safely, and we've got to make some sort of risk assessment prior to going in. So we would look for signs of danger, falling masonry, anything that might fall on our heads, holes in the floor, etc. It's important, and it's why a fire investigator needs a good working knowledge of building construction. But in addition to safety, appropriateness of a means of access would also relate to a common approach pathway. And a common approach pathway basically means that we try as much as we can to enter through a single entry point to minimise evidence spoliation, to minimise the possibility of taking contaminants into the scene and to causing cross-contamination. I think because of the range of fires that we are called upon to investigate, and I speak about that as a former fire officer and as now an independent fire investigator in the private sector. I think because of the range of potential environments that we work in, the most challenging part of the job is to know your limitations. We can attend fires in hospitals, in prisons, in ships, in high-rise buildings, schools, laboratories, factories, and we can't be expected to have a detailed knowledge in every piece of equipment that we might find in all those locations. Therefore, we need to know our own limitations and when it's required to bring in a specialist. Fire investigation is a strange subject in relation to employment. You can't pull a fully fledged fire investigator off the shelf, and fire and rescue services use experienced and qualified officers where they provide specialist training. Private companies tend to have their own person specs that they recruit to, and then use their own in-house training methods and external training methods to produce their idea of a fire investigator. My experience is that where people are looking for fire investigators, they are looking for people with some understanding of fire, experience in fire engineering or firefighting can help in that, but also it helps to have a background and a qualification in one of the sciences, chemistry, physics. Fire engineering is certainly another area that people can work towards, and electrical engineering is also something that's quite highly sought after. There are a lot of electrical engineers out there, but very few with an experience of fire. People wishing to take up a career in fire investigation should endeavour somehow to try and get some experience of working with fire, get a knowledge of how fire behaves, but they should also be looking at getting a specialism, and chemistry, electrical engineering are two of the common routes and where people are sourced from. Fire investigation has come on leaps and bounds in the last probably 30 years. Some quite high profile arson cases, particularly one that related in a series of deaths, focused certainly the minds of the fire and rescue services into providing a lot better fire investigation training. And I think the the proliferation of fire investigation training material in relation to books and training courses, and organisations such as the Institution of Fire Engineers, the International Association of Arson Investigators, the Forensic Science Service. These provide a bit of a forum for people to be able to get together and share ideas. So I think if I was asked, what was the most effective development, I think the improvements in training in fire investigation over the last 30 years probably would be my answer. Well, the film Observe and Preserve came about when I was working as the fire investigation team manager for Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service. We realised that we were attending fires and a lot of valuable evidence, valuable information that could have been there for us was on occasion being destroyed through the actions of firefighters. It was decided then that we'd make a film to educate and inform firefighters of the initial role, of the important role they have attending fires as a first responder. Their actions can make a vast difference to the effectiveness of a fire investigation, and the information they hold about what was happening when they arrived can be very, very valuable to the fire investigator. With regard to students, it's a useful tool that would show them the inside of fire scenes, what fire scenes look like, and what it's sometimes a daunting place it is. And it would help them to understand some of the thought processes of the fire investigator and some of the problems that they encounter. So I think it would have value, although it's not intended for students, I think it would have some value. I'm not sure that arsonists are becoming more clever. I think that from my own personal experience, the majority of arsons aren't carried out by professional arsonists. They're carried out by opportunists, vandals, people who have a grudge, and people who feel they may be able to make a fraudulent claim on their insurance. There is possibly people who realise now that putting an incendiary device in the middle of a fire scene is likely to be discovered and likely to point to the fact that the fire has been started deliberately. I think people do realise that fire investigation has come on over the last few years, and that people are more likely to be caught. People may be a little bit more cautious, but I'm not sure that the criminal elements have developed as much as the fire investigators have. I think in general most fire investigators working up and down the country don't have specialist equipment. I know from personal experience that some fire investigation teams do carry with them portable sniffing devices that can sample at the scene, and obviously some fire investigators use fire investigation dogs, hydrocarbon detector dogs, to identify the possible use of accelerants. These are only used in a very small number of cases, and they can be very useful. The fire investigation dogs are very quick. They can cover a large area very quickly. The portable sniffing devices tend to be very time consuming because you've got to have some idea of where the substance might have been. You can only cover small areas. And of course they can only be a guide. The sample still has to be taken, it still has to be sent for analysis, an authoritative report needs to be produced before that can be put before a court. So there are some people that carry portable devices that can assist with accelerant identification, but it's not the norm. Yes, the law states that in any fire that's not a crime, that the senior fire officer present is in charge of the scene, and they should realise, as should any fire investigator who's investigating after the emergency services have left, that as soon as there is any indication of criminality, that the police should be involved. That could even apply to people carrying out interviews. If you carry out an interview and you interview somebody and they incriminate themselves, you should at that point stop the interview. Any information gathered after that point, once you know or suspect that a crime has been committed, could be inadmissible as evidence, which is why the police should be involved. I think different companies and different organisations have their own strategies for how many samples and what variety of samples are taken from any fire scene. It would depend on how sure or unsure you may be that there is something there to sample. But if we're talking about ignitable liquids, cost can be an issue, and the number of samples taken will obviously be reflected in the cost of analysis later, which is why such things as fire investigation dogs are used. They can focus the investigator into a particular area and minimise the number of samples taken. There isn't a hard and fast rule, and it is one for personal preference, and you have got to remember that any sample taken would cost money to analyse and may also cost money to store as well. You may have to store them for lengthy periods of time. I don't think the methods of identification and packaging have changed. We still use nylon bags where accelerants are suspected, double bagged for obvious reasons. Glass is used, tins can be used, and other materials can be used where it's not regarded that accelerants are used. I think the thing that has changed significantly is the availability of these. Crime scene investigators carry quite a large range of packaging with them and have access to other types of packaging. And but we've seen this more and more now on fire investigation team vehicles from fire and rescue services. So I think the materials might be the same, but the packaging I think has become more and more available, and people are more confident in its use.